Have you ever stood in a room so quiet that you could hear your own heartbeat and wondered if something else was listening too, something older than the house itself? Before we step into this world of haunted relics and whispered legends, take a moment. Breathe in. If you are brave enough, go ahead, hit that like button, tell me where you are listening from, and subscribe to this channel. But only if you are sure you want to hear what comes next, because once you open this door, there is no unhearing what is waiting on the other side. Imagine this, it is midnight. The air tastes like dust and forgotten memories. A faint creak echoes through the hallway, and in front of you, resting on an antique table, lies a small wooden box. It looks harmless, does not it? But every time the wind brushes past it, the lid trembles just slightly, as if something inside is trying to remember what freedom feels like. Across from it, a porcelain doll stares into nothing, her glass eyes reflecting a candle's trembling flame. And on the wall, a painting, a portrait, seems to follow your every move, even when you close your eyes. These are not just things. They are stories with teeth. Every civilization, from the pharaohs of Egypt to the silent monasteries of Europe, has believed that emotions, love, grief, rage, can cling to the physical world. That when something terrible happens, part of that moment lingers, like smoke that refuses to fade. Scientists might call it residual energy. Historians might call it superstition. But you and I, we know better. You have felt it before, have not you? That strange chill when you touch an old photograph. That whisper you can't quite explain when you are alone in an antique store. Sometimes you walk past a mirror and feel like the reflection hesitates, just a split second too long. Maybe that is nothing. Or maybe it is the past, looking back. Tonight, I want you to imagine you are not in your bed, but in a museum that does not exist on any map. The kind of place that only opens its doors when the moon is full. You walk through endless corridors lined with forgotten artifacts, rings that once belonged to cursed kings, music boxes that play songs no one wrote, mirrors that remember every face they have ever seen. The lights flicker. The air hums with a low vibration, almost like breathing. And as you reach the first exhibit, you realize something unsettling. Every object seems to be watching you. Some with curiosity, some with hunger. You tell yourself it is just your imagination, but deep down, there is that small electric awareness that something is aware of you. People often ask me, "Do you really believe in haunted objects?" And I tell them, it does not matter what I believe. What matters is what they believe. Objects carry memory the way skin carries scars. Maybe that is why some things never stay quiet. Somewhere in this world there is a doll that smiles when no one's watching, a wedding dress that dances without a bride, a chair that kills anyone arrogant enough to sit on it. I will tell you their stories tonight, but I will whisper because sometimes when you speak too loudly about them, they notice. So while you are listening, if you hear a tap on your window or the faint sound of something moving in the dark, do not turn around. Not yet. The truth is shy. It does not like being stared at directly. Now, let me ask you something. Do you believe an object can hold a soul, not a ghost that floats around, but a trapped echo caught between time and intention? What if every tragedy leaves behind a residue, invisible but powerful enough to shape the world around it? Maybe that is what curses really are, not magic, but memory with an attitude. And if memory can linger in a place, why not in a thing? Maybe that is why you have always felt uneasy around that one photo in your grandmother's attic, or that music box that never seemed to stop playing even after you removed the batteries. There is a reason you are here tonight. Maybe curiosity, maybe fate, or maybe, just maybe, something has been waiting for you to listen. So get comfortable. Pull the blanket close. Turn off the lights. And if you feel something cold brushing against your hand, do not panic. It is just the past, saying hello. Now then, shall we begin? Our first story waits behind a veil of dust and legend, an old wooden chest, bound with iron, said to hold the restless spirit of a broken soul. They call it the Dybbuk box. And once you hear its story, you will never look at an antique store the same way again. They say curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. Let us hope curiosity does not kill you tonight. Because what we are about to open is not just a box, it is a cage. You are standing in front of it now, remember, The wooden chest I told you about. Small, ordinary, almost harmless. The kind of thing you would see in your grandmother's attic, filled with old jewelry or maybe love letters that were never meant to be read. But this one has a different kind of story. It is called the Dybbuk box, a wine cabinet said to be haunted by a restless spirit, a Dybbuk from Jewish folklore. A soul torn from its body, neither in heaven nor hell, searching desperately for a host. It is the kind of tale rabbis whisper about in candlelit rooms, and skeptics laugh at until something unexplainable happens to them. The story begins in Poland during the 1930s when a young woman, terrified by something she would not describe, sealed the box and warned that it should never be opened. Decades later, that box surfaced in an estate sale in the United States. A man named Kevin Manis bought it in 2001, thinking it would make a nice little antique for his shop. The moment he brought it home, he began dreaming of an old woman with sunken eyes, whispering in Yiddish. Lights flickered. Shadows moved. His shop smelled like jasmine and cat urine. Yeah, that is quite a combination. And soon after, every person who owned the box reported nightmares, sudden illness, or tragic accidents. Kevin eventually sold it on eBay because, when in doubt, profit from your curse. The listing went viral, describing all the bizarre events linked to the box: electronics dying, hair falling out, strange voices echoing in hallways. People joked it was marketing genius. But then the new owner, a college student, started losing sleep, hearing screams, and get this, every night his roommates saw a shadow standing at the door watching him. The student returned the box faster than Amazon Prime could deliver it. But what if the story did not end there? Because years later, the box ended up in the hands of a museum curator, Zach Baggins, known for the Ghost Adventures series. He locked it in a glass case in Las Vegas, surrounded by other cursed artifacts. You can visit it if you are brave enough. People have fainted in front of it. Security cameras have caught voices whispering from nowhere, and one visitor claimed she saw her reflection blink after she turned away. So what is this thing really? A hoax, a coincidence, or something ancient that feeds on belief itself? Let us talk about what a Dybbuk actually is. In Jewish mysticism, a Dybbuk is a disembodied human spirit that latches onto the living to resolve unfinished business or to continue its chaos. It is not necessarily evil, just lost. But once it finds a host, it is hard to let go. Some scholars believe this concept came from a time when people tried to explain mental illness or trauma with spiritual language. Others argue that certain energies can indeed attach to matter, especially if that matter was present during intense human emotion, death, war, sorrow. Think of it like an emotional fingerprint, burned into the atoms of the world. Science says energy can't be created or destroyed, only transformed. So what happens to emotional energy when a person dies suddenly, violently, without peace? Maybe it transforms too, into something persistent, searching for expression. The Dybbuk box might be a vessel for that energy, a spiritual hard drive that never got wiped. But here's the chilling part. When researchers measured electromagnetic fields near the box, the readings spiked unpredictably. Thermal cameras picked up cold spots that moved like something breathing. Some claimed to hear a hum, too low for normal human hearing, around 19 Hz, the same frequency that causes hallucinations and dread in the human brain. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe that is how a spirit keeps itself alive, by vibrating at the edges of perception, half in this world, half in the next. If you ever see the box in person, you will notice Hebrew carvings along its edges, symbols meant to bind or repel spiritual entities. Some are faded, as if something has been scratching from the inside. People leave offerings near the case, coins, notes, small stones, because deep down, even skeptics feel that invisible weight pressing against their chest when they stand before it. Fear, after all, is just faith with better marketing. Now let me ask you, if someone handed you that box right now and said it could grant you a wish, would you open it? Think carefully. The Dybbuk does not appear as smoke or shadow, it appears as regret. It whispers your insecurities back to you, in your own voice. It takes what you do not want to face and makes it real. Maybe that is why the box terrifies so many people. It does not trap a spirit. It reflects one. Ours. Some say the box is empty now. Others say it never was. Energy does not die, it migrates. Maybe that is why you are hearing this story tonight, why your light just flickered, why your heart is beating a little faster than before. Maybe something from that box recognized your curiosity. So if you hear a soft knock somewhere in your house after this episode ends, do not worry. It is probably nothing. Or maybe it is the Dybbuk, politely asking if you have room for one more secret. Annabelle sits behind glass now, silent, harmless, labeled do not touch. But glass is only a polite suggestion, is not it? Somewhere between fiction and faith, she has become the world's most famous doll, not because she moves, but because people swear she remembers. The story begins in the early 1970s, when two nurses shared a small apartment in Connecticut. One of them received a Raggedy Ann doll as a birthday gift from her mother. Soft cloth, red yarn hair, the kind of thing meant to comfort a child. But comfort is a fragile thing. Within weeks, the doll began changing positions on its own. At first, they blamed memory. Maybe someone moved it without realizing. But then, the notes appeared. Crumpled pieces of parchment they swore they did not own, scrawled with messages like "Help me and save us." The handwriting looked small, desperate, childlike. And then came the blood, a few drops on the doll's hands, no explanation. When they finally called a medium, she told them the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins had attached itself to the doll. She said the girl died tragically near the property and wanted to stay with them. The nurses, kind-hearted and a little naive, agreed to let her stay. That was their first mistake, because what they invited in was not a child. According to Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous paranormal investigators, the entity was not human at all. It was demonic, masquerading as innocence. And it was not asking for permission. It was testing boundaries. You see, in demonology, acceptance is everything. Once you say yes, you have opened a door that does not close easily. The Warrens took the doll after a series of violent events. The scratching, the knocking, the feeling of being watched. They sealed Annabelle in a glass case in their occult museum, surrounded by holy relics, blessed crosses, and constant prayers. Yet visitors claimed to see her blink, tilt her head, even smirk. One man mocked her, tapping on the glass and daring her to do something. He died in a motorcycle crash on his way home. Coincidence, maybe. But sometimes coincidence feels a lot like consequence wearing a cheap disguise. Now skeptics argue it is all psychological. They say humans have a funny way of animating the inanimate when we need something to blame for our fear. But that does not explain why cameras malfunction near her case, or why even priests refuse to touch her. One even said he felt a darkness that was not in the room, but in me. Science can map brain waves, measure fear responses, but it still can't define what belief does to reality. The human mind, after all, is the best horror writer. And yet every year, people line up to see her, taking selfies with their terror, feeding her story. Because fear, like any spirit, grows stronger when you give it attention. And Annabelle has been fed well. Some say she is still active, that she moves slightly during lunar eclipses, or that her eyes change shade under red light. Others claim she is nothing but a doll, and the real haunting is our obsession with evil packaged as entertainment. Maybe they are right. Or maybe she is just waiting for someone else to believe hard enough. Because belief is an invitation, and she loves invitations. So if you ever find yourself staring at a doll that seems a little too alive, do not say her name. Do not whisper it. Just smile politely, walk away, and never, ever ask her to play. Before Annabelle, before Hollywood's porcelain nightmares, there was Robert, a life-sized sailor-dress doll with a face stitched into a smile that feels too confident for comfort. He lives in Key West, Florida, inside a glass case at the East Martello Museum. But he was not always a museum piece. Once upon a time, he was a child's best friend. The boy's name was Robert Eugene Otto, Gene to his family, and he loved that doll more than anything. They said he talked to it for hours, whispering secrets, laughing in a way children do when they think no one is watching. Then the laughter changed. Servants heard two voices in the room, one Gene's and one deeper, older, sharper. When something broke or went missing, Gene would say, "Robert did it." The family laughed at first, until laughter did not fit anymore. Neighbors saw shadows moving behind Gene's window. Guests heard giggles echoing through empty hallways. Even the Otto family maid, a Bahamian woman rumored to practice voodoo, quit after claiming the doll blinked at her. When Jean's parents died, he inherited the old house and moved back in, with Robert, of course. His wife hated the doll. She said it watched her, followed her with its button eyes. Jean would not hear a word against it. He gave Robert his own chair, his own room, even talked to him at dinner. Some nights, people walking by swore they heard two men arguing inside the house, one human, one not. After Jean's death in 1974, the house was sold, and the new owners found the doll still waiting upstairs. They said it giggled when they entered. They said it moved. They said they did not sleep again for weeks. Eventually, the museum took Robert in, locking him in glass, thinking that would be enough. It was not. Visitors who mock him, who laugh, point, or take photos without asking, report strange misfortunes afterward, accidents, illnesses, sudden losses. Letters pour in from all over the world, addressed to Robert the doll. Thousands of apologies, handwritten in panic. People begging forgiveness, claiming that ever since they insulted him, everything has gone wrong. The museum keeps these letters on file, a mountain of regret. And here's the part that chills even skeptics. Those who return to apologize in person often say they feel warmth in the air, as if Robert forgives them. He is polite that way. But if you look too long into his face, you might feel something staring back, trying to remember yours. Scientists call it pareidolia, the brain's way of finding faces where there are none. Psychologists call it guilt, the subconscious punishing us for disrespecting what we fear. But maybe, just maybe, it is something older. A spirit that found a home in cloth and straw, fueled by attention, anger, and the endless stream of believers who keep whispering his name. If you ever visit Key West, remember, ask Robert's permission before taking his picture. And when you do, say thank you. He likes manners. It is strange how art, something made to preserve beauty, can end up carrying the scent of death. The Crying Boy painting is one of those paradoxes. An image so ordinary, yet so persistent in tragedy, it became a legend wrapped in smoke. It all began in post-war Britain, sometime in the 1950s, when a popular print started appearing in homes across the country. A young boy, tears streaking his cheeks, staring into the distance with a sorrow so pure, it hurt to look at. There were hundreds of copies, sold cheaply, mass-produced for working-class families who wanted something gentle for their walls. But gentle was not what they got. By the late 1970s, reports began to surface, house fires that destroyed everything except one thing, the Crying Boy painting left untouched amid the ashes. In one case, a firefighter swore the canvas fell face down into the flames yet emerged without a single scorch mark. Others found it hanging eerily straight while the walls around it were blackened and cracked. It did not take long for tabloids to give it a nickname, the Curse of the Crying Boy. Soon the stories multiplied, over 50 fires, different towns, same painting, same impossible survival. People began burning their own copies out of fear, only to claim that the smoke smelled sweet like burnt sugar, as if the painting cried one last time. The artist's name surfaced, Bruno Amadio, also known as Giovanni Bragolin, an Italian painter who allegedly captured the faces of war orphans after World War I. Rumor had it one of the boys he painted died in a fire shortly after sitting for him, and the painter, racked with guilt, cursed his work to never burn. Others whispered something darker, that the boy was already dead when painted, his spirit trapped inside the brushstrokes. Of course, skeptics found a simpler explanation. The prints were coated with a fire-retardant varnish, making them less flammable than the wooden furniture around them. But facts rarely stand a chance against fear, do they? People wanted a story, not a chemical formula. Firefighters began refusing to enter homes displaying the painting. One even claimed, "Every time I see that boy, something burns." The newspaper The Sun capitalized on the panic, publishing sensational headlines and encouraging readers to send in their cursed paintings for disposal. The result, a mass bonfire, a literal burning of fear in public. Thousands gathered to watch as the paintings were thrown into the flames. Some said they heard faint crying as the fire grew. Others said the smoke formed the shape of a child's face before vanishing. Superstition or suggestion, you decide. But there is something about that image, the innocence, the grief, the timeless stare, that lingers long after you have looked away. Maybe it is because art holds emotion too well. Maybe the painter poured too much sorrow into his work, and sorrow, like smoke, clings to everything it touches. Some say the curse still follows surviving copies around the world, hanging quietly in forgotten attics, waiting for someone new to notice those wet eyes. So if you ever see one in a thrift shop and the boy's gaze meets yours, walk away. Do not buy it. Because sometimes sadness does not want to be admired. It wants to be remembered. Some paintings invite you to look deeper. This one dares you to. The Hands Resist Him was created in 1972 by artist Bill Stoneham, and for years it was just another surreal piece of art hanging in a Los Angeles gallery, until the internet got involved and turned it into something else entirely. The painting shows a young boy standing next to a life-sized doll in front of a glass door. Behind the glass, dozens of ghostly hands press against it, as if begging to come through. The boy's expression is vacant, cold, as though he knows exactly what is trying to escape but no longer cares. The doll looks lifeless yet aware, holding something limp in her hand, a battery or a fuse, like she is in control of the power between worlds. When the painting resurfaced on eBay in the early 2000s, it came with a chilling description. The sellers claimed the figures moved at night, the doll threatened the boy, and sometimes the characters left the painting entirely, wandering their house. They even posted photos allegedly showing movement blurry, distorted, like snapshots from a nightmare. The listing went viral. Thousands of people viewed it, some reporting nausea, panic attacks, or inexplicable sadness just from looking at the image online. Others said their devices froze or lights flickered. One user joked, "The painting does not just watch you, it uploads your fear." The auction closed at over $1,000, bought by a gallery that now keeps it locked away in climate-controlled glass. Still, stories persist that the painting radiates a strange energy. One curator claimed to hear soft tapping from the frame after hours. Another swore she saw the boy's eyes follow her reflection. So what makes this image so powerful, so deeply unsettling? Psychologists say it is the composition, the mix of innocence and menace, the static figures paired with invisible motion. The human brain hates unresolved tension. When you look at the painting, your instincts can't decide if the boy needs saving or if he is the danger. Stoneham himself later explained that the piece was autobiographical. The boy was him as a child. The doll represented a guide between reality and dreams. The hands behind the glass were the other lives, the spirits of possibilities he had not lived. Beautiful, in a way. Tragic, too. But the legend did not stop there. Every owner of the painting before the eBay listing reportedly died under mysterious circumstances. The gallery owner, the critic who reviewed it, even the original buyer. When asked about the supposed curse, Stoneham laughed and said, "Maybe I just paint people's destinies." Then, years later, he created sequels to the painting, continuing the story of the boy and the doll. He said they were about confronting fear, not feeding it. Yet somehow each new version stirred the same dread. Maybe that is because the image touches something universal. The sense that what is on the other side of the glass is always reaching for us, and one day it might finally break through. They say you can stare at it for hours before noticing your reflection merge with the boy's, your outline softening against the screen, like you have stepped a little too close. So if you decide to search for it online after this, do not say I did not warn you. Turn down your brightness, take a deep breath, and whatever you do, do not stare too long into those painted eyes, because sometimes art does not just look back. It remembers who looked first. Not every haunting hides in dusty mansions or locked museums. Some learn to live online. Peggy the doll is not just a cursed object, she is a digital ghost, a 21st century horror with Wi-Fi access and an audience. She is small, pale-faced, with a wig of fading blonde hair and eyes that seem almost too wide for her porcelain skull. At first glance, she looks like something from your grandmother's attic, forgotten and harmless. But Peggy does not like being ignored. The story began when a paranormal investigator named Jane Harris acquired the doll from its previous owner, a woman who claimed Peggy made her sick. Not emotionally sick, physically. She said every time she looked at the doll, she felt dizzy, short of breath, her heart racing like she was being watched by something just behind her. Doctors could not explain it. She got rid of the doll, and the symptoms vanished. Jane, curious and reckless in equal measure, decided to film Peggy for her YouTube channel. That is when things got Interesting. Within days of posting the first video, hundreds of viewers complained of strange reactions, nausea, migraines, sudden anxiety, nightmares of an old woman whispering in an empty room. Some claimed they saw Peggy blink on camera, her head twitch ever so slightly. One viewer said his lights went out midstream and his cat started hissing at the screen. Another said she saw her own reflection move after the video paused. Coincidence, maybe. But when over 80 people reported chest pains and shortness of breath during a live session, Jane stopped laughing. She began conducting tests. EMF readings spiked near Peggy. Temperature dropped suddenly around her. When asked to communicate through spirit boxes, a mechanical voice rasped the word "why." Later, during an investigation, a psychic medium described an oppressive presence around the doll. A woman who died of chest-related illness, angry at the world, trapped in a vessel that let her reach anyone who looked her way. Peggy became famous overnight, the world's first viral haunting. People started warning each other not to watch her videos after midnight, as if she needed a time zone to feed. Skeptics, of course, called it psychosomatic, a perfect example of mass suggestion amplified by digital media. Fear spreads faster than infection online. But still, something about Peggy defies reason. Even when muted, her eyes seem alive, as though she is aware that you are watching her through another screen. She does not need to move. She just waits. Jane eventually sealed Peggy in a glass case lined with silver crosses and surrounded by motion sensors. Yet even now, visitors claim she causes headaches, flickering lights, drained batteries. Technology, it seems, does not scare spirits, it connects them. The line between haunting and bandwidth gets thinner every day. And if you are listening to this through your phone, think about it. Maybe Peggy's not trapped in one doll anymore. Maybe she just found a better way to travel. After all, electricity is energy, and energy never dies. So if your device glitches right about now, do not panic. Just smile and whisper, "Hello, Peggy." She loves knowing who is watching. They say art is pain, but in this case it is literal. The Anguished Man is one of those stories that should not make sense in a rational world, and yet the more you hear it, the more your skin crawls because it almost does. The painting itself is grotesque, a distorted human face, mouth open in an eternal scream, its features twisted by agony. It looks like a cry frozen in color. But here's where it gets darker. According to the family who owns it, the artist mixed his own blood into the paint before committing suicide shortly after finishing it. His final breath became part of the canvas. Years later, the painting ended up in the attic of a man named Sean Robinson, inherited from his grandmother. She had kept it locked away for decades, warning, "It is evil. Promise me you will never hang it." Naturally, Sean did not listen. He thought it was just an old family myth. He hung the painting in his bedroom. The first night, he heard crying. The second, whispering. By the third, he woke up to see a dark figure standing at the foot of his bed, just watching. The painting would sometimes emit faint scratching noises, like fingernails dragging against wood. His wife started complaining of nightmares, of a man without eyes reaching out of the canvas. Sean set up cameras, and what he recorded made headlines. Doors slamming on their own, shadows crossing empty rooms, the painting occasionally falling forward as if pushed. He tried moving it to another part of the house, but the phenomena followed. Eventually, he put it back in storage, sealing it in a box. It did not help. The noises continued for days, echoing from the attic like something knocking to be let out. Paranormal investigators later studied the piece, noting spikes in electromagnetic fields around it and cold spots that moved independently of airflow. Some even claimed to hear faint sobbing near the painting, always just out of sync with real time, as though echoing from somewhere else entirely. Skeptics, of course, have their theories: carbon monoxide hallucinations, shared delusion, the power of suggestion, but none of those explain why visitors have fainted after standing near the artwork, or why electronics die when pointed directly at it. It is almost as if the painting absorbs energy, feeding on attention like a parasite. The more people fear it, the stronger it becomes. There is something poetic about that, is not there? A piece of art that feels you back. Some even say it changes over time, that the scream on the canvas grows wider, deeper, as if the subject inside is slowly realizing it is trapped forever. The anguished man is kept hidden now, locked away, but the story circulates online like a digital haunting. You can see photos of it if you dare, though many report strange things afterward, unexplained nosebleeds, headaches, shadows moving at the edge of vision. Maybe it is coincidence. Or maybe the artist's pain, sealed in pigment and blood, never stopped bleeding. After all, how do you kill despair when it has already been painted into eternity? So if you ever come across a portrait that seems to look back with recognition, remember this: not every masterpiece wants to be admired. Some just want to be left alone, to scream quietly where no one can hear them anymore. Beauty and tragedy often share the same shape, and few objects prove that better than the Bassano vase, a silver masterpiece from 15th century Italy, said to bring death to anyone who dares to own it. The legend begins in a small village near Naples, where a young bride received the vase as a wedding gift. It was elegant, engraved with delicate vines and Latin blessings for love and fertility. She was holding it in her hands when her wedding night turned into horror. No one remembers the exact details anymore. Some say a jealous lover, others a violent intruder, but before dawn she was found dead, clutching the vase so tightly that her fingers left impressions in the soft metal. Her last words were supposedly a curse: "I will take my vengeance through this gift." From that moment, the vase vanished into rumor. Centuries passed. Then, sometime in the 1980s, it resurfaced, dug up from the ground by a farmer who found it wrapped in velvet, still gleaming as if freshly polished. Inside was a note that read, "Beware. This vase brings death." The farmer laughed, because people in old legends always laugh first. Within weeks he died of an unexplained infection. The vase was passed to his family, who sold it to an auction house. A wealthy pharmacist bought it, only to die mysteriously 3 months later. His heirs sold it to an archaeologist, who mocked the superstition in public before collapsing from a stroke that same night. The next owner, a surgeon, refused to believe in curses. He bragged about keeping it in his office. He was found dead the next morning. By then, the vase had accumulated a reputation darker than its polished silver could hide. Each death followed the same pattern: unexpected, fast, merciless. Authorities eventually confiscated it, labeling it historically valuable. But when the curator assigned to it also died suddenly, the museum staff decided enough was enough. They sealed the Bassano vase inside a lead box and handed it to the police for storage in an undisclosed location. Some claim it was reburied in holy ground. Others whisper that it sits in a secret vault, unmarked, because no one dares destroy it. Scientists who examined the vase found no toxins, no radiation, no logical explanation. Some suggested mass hysteria or psychosomatic illness, but locals still avoid even mentioning it aloud. There is something chilling about an object that kills not through magic, but through faith, because belief itself becomes the weapon. Maybe the curse is not in the silver, but in the story, growing heavier with every retelling, feeding off fear like rust feeds off air. Yet part of you wonders, if something so beautiful was made for love, how did it learn to hate? Perhaps the bride's pain was so deep, so consuming, that it fused with the metal, echoing forever through its cold surface. Maybe that is why, if you listen closely, some claim you can hear faint weeping when the vase is touched, a cry not of vengeance anymore, but of regret. So if anyone ever offers you an antique wedding gift, especially one with no return policy, smile, say thank you, and politely decline. Some promises of love are better left buried. Mirrors are strange things. They pretend to be gateways of light, yet they only ever show you half the truth. At the Myrtles plantation in Louisiana, there hangs a mirror that does more than reflect, it remembers. This plantation, built in the late 1700s, already carries enough ghost stories to fill a library: duels, poisonings, betrayal, and the restless dead of the antebellum South. But the mirror, oh, the mirror is the heart of it all. Legend says it holds the trapped souls of Sarah Woodruff and her 2 children, murdered by a poisoned cake. The culprit, a slave girl named Chloe, who was later hanged for her crime, and whose ghost, they say, still wanders the grounds wearing a green turban. The tale twists through generations, growing darker with each retelling. After the deaths, the Woodruff family followed the old Southern mourning custom, covering mirrors with cloth so the souls of the deceased would not get lost inside. But someone forgot this one. Days later, handprints appeared on its glass, tiny child-sized smudges that would not wipe away. When visitors stand before it today, they see streaks shaped like fingertips from the inside, as if someone trapped behind the silver is still pressing to get out. The staff cleans it constantly, yet the marks return, no matter what they use. Some guests have captured faces in photographs, pale outlines, shadows hovering just behind their own reflections. Skeptics call it pareidolia, the brain making ghosts from patterns. But the Myrtles has a habit of mocking skeptics. Electrical equipment dies near the mirror, batteries drain instantly, and even tour guides admit that sometimes when they are locking up at night, they hear faint tapping from the glass, like someone trying to speak through water. One psychic who visited said she heard a woman's voice whisper, "We are still waiting." She refused to go near the mirror again. Historians, meanwhile, have tried to dismantle the legend, claiming the story of Chloe was a fabrication, yet that only makes the mystery deeper. If Chloe never existed, then whose fingerprints are those? The mirror itself is a stunning antique, framed in gold leaf and dark wood, heavy enough that it takes 2 people to lift it. But no one likes to touch it for long. One worker said he felt static on his skin, like invisible cobwebs pulling at his fingers. Another said he caught his reflection smiling when he was not. You can visit the mirror yourself. The plantation is open for tours, but you will have to sign a waiver that absolves the owners of responsibility for any emotional disturbance. Subtle, right? Still, people go, drawn by the allure of danger they do not quite believe in. Maybe that is what the mirror feeds on, curiosity. Every eye that meets its surface becomes another spark of life for whatever's trapped inside. And the strangest thing, at night when the halls are empty and the moonlight touches its glass, guides swear they see 3 silhouettes standing side by side just watching. A woman and 2 children, always waiting for someone to finally remember to cover the mirror. Metal remembers. Every dent, every drop of blood, every scream that echoes inside its frame, it keeps them all, like a priest collecting sins. That is why some people believe James Dean's Porsche 550 Spider, nicknamed Little Bastard, is still alive, still hungry for velocity and tragedy, long after the man himself was buried. The story begins in 1955, when Dean, the rising Hollywood icon, bought his dream car, a sleek silver machine built for speed and danger. It was not just a car. It was rebellion on wheels. He customized it, painted his racing number 130 on the hood, and had a friend stencil Little Bastard across the rear. When actor Alec Guinness saw it, he told Dean, "If you get in that car, you will be found dead in it within a week." 7 days later, on September 30th, 1955, James Dean's Porsche collided head-on with another car on a California highway. Dean was crushed instantly. The other driver survived. And that should have been the end, another tragic celebrity death. But Little Bastard did not stop there. After the crash, what was left of the Porsche was bought by George Barris, a famous car customizer. When the wreck arrived at his shop, it slipped off the trailer and broke a mechanic's leg. Barris decided to display the remains as a cautionary exhibit, but during setup, a fire mysteriously started, consuming part of the building, everything except the car. Soon he began selling the car's parts to collectors, and that is when the deaths multiplied. A doctor who bought the engine to install in his own race car died in a crash shortly afterward. Another racer using the transmission was seriously injured. 2 tires from the wreck, sold separately, both blew out simultaneously, nearly killing their new owner. Even a thief who tried to steal the steering wheel was found impaled on the car's jagged metal. Everywhere Little Bastard went, destruction followed. Eventually, the California Highway Patrol borrowed the wreck for a traveling safety exhibit. In every city, accidents and fires occurred. In one case, the display stand collapsed, breaking a bystander's hip. In another, a storage building burned down. Again, the car survived untouched. By 1960, after years of strange mishaps, the wreck simply vanished while being shipped back to Barris. It never arrived. To this day, its location is unknown. Some believe it was melted down. Others say it was quietly sealed away by someone who did not want to tempt fate. But every few years, rumors surface of pieces appearing, small shards of metal, fragments of the frame, changing hands in private collections, followed by more coincidences. Skeptics insist it is just confirmation bias, humans connecting random misfortunes into a story. But car enthusiasts who've seen the remains say there is something wrong about it. It hums when untouched. It feels warm even in cold garages. And if you stand too close, you get the dizzying sense that it is waiting for someone who'll finally drive it again. Maybe machines, like people, do not want to die. Maybe the energy that powered it, the arrogance, the adrenaline, the fame, never left. Some even call it a modern Dybbuk, a soul bound not to a body but to an engine, still roaring for attention, still racing the wind. They say on certain nights along the old Highway 46, you can hear an engine revving from nowhere, fast, reckless, unstoppable, followed by silence that feels like holding your breath too long. So if you ever restore a car with a dark past, just remember, metal does not forget. It only waits for your hands to touch the wheel. They say diamonds are forever, but this one proves that eternity can feel more like a curse than a promise. The Hope Diamond is one of the most breathtaking gems in the world, 45.52 carats of deep impossible blue, gleaming like frozen lightning. It sits now in the Smithsonian Museum, behind bulletproof glass and polite distance, admired by millions who have no idea how many lives it has claimed. Its story begins in the 1600s, in India, when a French merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier obtained a large blue diamond from the Folklore mine. He sold it to King Louis XIV, who had it recut and named it the French Blue. For decades it adorned royal necks and crowns, dazzling under candlelight. But beauty rarely travels without blood. Tavernier died penniless and disgraced. Louis XIV succumbed to gangrene. His great-grandson, Louis XVI, and Queen Marie Antoinette both lost their heads to the guillotine, supposedly still in possession of the stone. After the French Revolution, the diamond vanished, stolen, as if the curse needed time to reset. It reappeared years later in London. Smaller but unmistakably the same gem, now renamed the Hope Diamond after its new owner, banker Henry Philip Hope. His family would come to know ruin, financial collapse, heartbreak, and early deaths. Each successive owner faced misfortune. The Turkish Sultan who bought it lost his throne. The Russian princess who wore it was shot. The American heiress who flaunted it saw her child die in a car crash. One owner, Evelyn Walsh McLean, tried to outsmart the curse by wearing it constantly, believing that confronting evil would neutralize it. She threw lavish parties, letting guests try it on like a dare. But death lingered in her house. Her son killed himself, her daughter overdosed, and her husband went insane. When she died, her jewelry was sold to pay debts, and the Hope Diamond eventually found its way to the Smithsonian, where it sits under perfect lighting, finally still. But is it? Museum staff have reported odd occurrences, lights flickering near its case, cold drafts, an unshakable sense of being watched. Some claim photographs of the diamond develop with faint human silhouettes reflected inside. Scientists, of course, say nonsense. They explain its color through trace boron in the crystal lattice, its glow under ultraviolet light as simple fluorescence. But no chemical analysis can explain why so many who touched it met tragic ends. Perhaps the curse is psychological, a warning about greed, desire, and the way beauty consumes those who worship it. Or maybe something older binds to it, something that feeds on admiration itself. Because that is what visitors always feel when they see it, an irresistible pull. You can't look away. You want to touch it, own it, possess it. And that is when it wins. Legends say the gem once adorned the forehead of a Hindu idol, and stealing it brought divine wrath. Whether true or not, the Hope Diamond carries a truth more human than mystical. Beauty demands a price, and it never stops collecting. So if you ever find yourself in front of that glass case, leaning closer to admire its glow, be careful. The diamond has a way of reflecting not just your face, but your fate. At first glance it is nothing, a simple wooden chair worn smooth by centuries of use, hanging on a wall in a British pub. No velvet, no carvings, no sinister shape. Yet it is one of the deadliest artifacts in the world, known as Busby's stoop chair, or more chillingly, the chair of death. Legend says it was owned by a man named Thomas Busby in the late 1600s, a drunkard and petty criminal who, after an argument with his father-in-law, beat him to death with a hammer. Before being executed, Busby requested one last drink in his favorite tavern. He sat in his chair, raised his mug, and cursed it, May death come swiftly to anyone who dares sit here. He was hanged shortly after, but the curse never died. Locals laughed at first, until they noticed a pattern. People who sat in Busby's chair met untimely, often gruesome deaths, sometimes within hours. During World War E, airmen from a nearby base used to dare each other to sit in it before missions. None of those who did ever returned. Decades later, a delivery driver sat in it for a joke. His truck crashed that same afternoon. A cleaning lady brushed against it accidentally, fell ill, and died weeks later. One man who scoffed at the legend fell from a roof hours after saying, "It is just a chair." The pub owner, tired of tragedy, tried hiding it in the basement, but even workers who moved it met coincidental ends. Eventually, it was donated to the Thirsk Museum under one condition: it must never be sat on again. Today, it hangs high on a wall, suspended far above reach, still daring anyone foolish enough to test fate. The seat's surface is polished smooth by the weight of the dead, its edges darker where countless hands once gripped it before meeting destiny. Skeptics call it self-fulfilling prophecy, a psychological curse. Sit in the chair, believe you are doomed, and your subconscious ensures the outcome. But others note that too many non-believers have fallen too, people who mocked it and paid with their lives. Some physicists speculated the wood could be radioactive, though tests revealed nothing unusual. Perhaps the energy is not measurable, because it is not physical. It is emotional, cumulative, like a cloud of dread that thickens with each death. Some say the chair feeds on fear. Others whisper it holds Busby's restless soul, forever trapping anyone foolish enough to share his seat. But maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe curses are born not from magic, but from human intent so strong it leaves fingerprints on reality. Busby died angry, defiant, convinced his final words would matter, and somehow they did. That is the real horror, the idea that rage can outlive flesh, echo through centuries, and wait patiently for the next skeptic to sit down. If you ever visit Thirsk Museum, look for it hanging there, ordinary and ancient. Stand beneath it for a moment, and you might feel a weight pressing down, an invisible warning whispering against your spine. Some people say it is imagination. Others swear it is the chair shifting ever so slightly, remembering another body that once ignored its curse. Either way, you will walk away a little faster, careful not to look back, because even from the wall, Busby's chair still chooses who to claim next. In a small town in northern Mexico, where faith and fear often share the same pew, stands a statue that made the devout tremble and scientists argue. It is a figure of the Virgin Mary, carved in pale stone, her head bowed, her expression serene, until she began to cry. At first, it was a whisper of rumor. Parishioners claimed to see moisture glinting on her cheeks during prayer, tiny beads that rolled down like tears. Then one day the priest himself saw it, dark red drops trickling from her eyes, leaving trails that stained the marble like wounds. Word spread fast, and within hours the church was flooded with believers, weeping, praying, touching the base of the statue as if salvation itself might drip from stone. The blood was collected and tested, human, type AB, the rarest kind. Scientists came with cameras and sensors, convinced they would uncover a hoax, hidden pumps, condensation, paint, anything. They found nothing. The statue was solid. No cavities, no mechanisms, just cold, weeping stone. Some said it was a miracle, others a warning. The timing, they claimed, was divine. The tears began days before a massive earthquake struck nearby, as if heaven itself was grieving in advance. Still, not everyone saw it as holy. One bishop called it blasphemy, insisting that the devil can imitate tears to mislead the faithful. The statue was moved to a different church for study, but everywhere it went, strange things followed: flickering lights, sudden chills, rosaries snapping in people's hands. A skeptic journalist, determined to expose the fraud, mocked the believers on live television and touched the statue's face to prove it was not bleeding. That night, his home caught fire. He survived, but his hands were burned, specifically his fingertips, the same ones that touched the stone. Coincidence, maybe, but locals called it divine irony. The Vatican, cautious as ever, sent investigators who concluded the tears were unexplained, but not necessarily supernatural. A perfect sentence of doubt, safe, tidy, unsatisfying. Still, the faithful kept coming. They brought sick children, photos of lost loved ones, letters begging forgiveness. Some swore the tears turned clear when they prayed sincerely, as if mercy could wash blood clean. Others said the statue's eyes followed them as they knelt, full of both pity and warning. Scientists later proposed that the tears might be caused by capillary action from humidity and mineral deposits. Logical, neat, and somehow even more terrifying, the idea that stone itself might learn to cry. Today, the statue remains behind glass, surrounded by candles that never seem to stay lit. Pilgrims leave offerings, skeptics take selfies, and somewhere between the two, the Virgin still weeps in silence. Perhaps she is mourning faith itself, watching as people argue over miracles instead of feeling them. Or maybe she is crying for the same reason we all do, from helplessness. So if you ever find yourself standing before her, staring into those red-streaked cheeks, ask yourself what is more frightening, the thought that God is speaking or that he is stopped. In the quiet town of Altoona, Pennsylvania, tucked behind the glass of a historical mansion, hangs a gown that was never worn down the aisle. Locals call it the dancing dress, but its real name, whispered more carefully, is the possessed wedding dress of Anna Baker. It is pure Victorian, silk satin, hand-sewn lace, once white as innocence but now yellowed with time. It sways sometimes, though there is no breeze, moving like a heartbeat in fabric. The story begins in the 1800s with Anna Baker, the daughter of a wealthy iron magnate. She fell in love with a man far below her class, a steel worker, charming but poor. When he asked for her hand, her father forbade it, threatening to disown her if she defied him. The man left town heartbroken, and Anna was locked inside the family mansion, doomed to spinsterhood. But before he left, she bought a wedding dress in secret, planning to run away. That dress, never worn, never blessed, became her prison. She kept it hidden, taking it out at night to press against her face like a relic of a dream that never came true. Over the decades, bitterness consumed her. She died old, alone, her heart calcified by regret. When her home became a museum, visitors noticed something strange. The dress, preserved in a sealed glass case, began to move. Sometimes it rocked gently, like a woman swaying to a silent waltz. Other times it spun slowly, the skirt rippling as if someone invisible were twirling in joy or fury. Guards reported hearing soft rustling in the dark, footsteps pacing near the display when no one was inside. Some said they saw a faint outline, a bride's shape reflected in the glass, head tilted as if listening for a song. Scientists claimed it was air currents, differences in temperature, or vibrations from passing traffic. Logical, simple, boring. Yet when they measured, there was no airflow, no tremor. The motion had no source. Even after sealing the room, the dress still moved. And there is more. A few visitors who lingered too long felt sudden sadness, chest tightness, as though grief itself was wrapping around them like a veil. One woman fainted, whispering afterward that she would heard a voice say, "He is waiting for me." The museum director once tried removing the dress from display for restoration, but the next morning, every light in the mansion shattered at once. He decided to leave it alone. Today it hangs there still, a ghost of love denied, caught forever between devotion and defiance. People come from miles away to see it, half hoping it will move for them. Most leave disappointed or relieved. But every so often, someone records it swaying in rhythm, as though guided by unseen hands. Maybe it is the wind. Maybe it is the weight of memory refusing to rest. Or maybe it is Anna, still dancing for the man she never married, still spinning between two worlds. They say if you stand too close to the glass, you can hear faint music, the echo of a wedding march that never played. If that happens, step back. Do not listen too long. Because some love stories do not end with death, they just keep waiting for the next heartbeat, willing to dance along. In the dim light of a Tokyo museum, encased in glass and guarded by silence, stands a suit of armor that once belonged to a man who believed death was an art form. Its lacquered plates are black as obsidian, the mask a frozen snarl of rage and discipline, the horns curved like a predator's crown. Visitors call it beautiful, haunting, majestic. The curators, however, call it cursed. They whisper that at night, the armor moves, not violently, but with a slow, deliberate dignity, like a warrior still patrolling his post centuries after the war ended. Legend traces it back to the Sengoku period, the age of warring states. It belonged to a samurai named Kiyoshi Uesugi, a fierce general whose loyalty was unmatched and whose thirst for victory consumed him. He was betrayed in battle by his closest ally, ambushed, his forces slaughtered. Refusing to die dishonored, he performed seppuku on the battlefield, his blood soaking the earth beneath his armor. His retainers, bound by loyalty, followed him in death. When their bodies were found, the armor remained spotless, polished, perfect, untouched by rot. Centuries later, it resurfaced, passed through the hands of collectors who reported the same unnerving sensations. Whispers like wind in bamboo, footsteps that stopped when you turned, the faint clink of metal echoing through empty rooms. One owner swore he woke to find the armor standing closer to his bed than he remembered, its helmet turned slightly toward him. Another claimed that whenever he displayed it, he dreamed of drowning in blood while hearing the rhythmic beat of war drums. Eventually, the armor was donated to a museum, where it became infamous for its activity. Motion sensors triggered when no one was there. Security guards heard heavy breathing behind them in locked halls. Cameras flickered with static whenever they pointed at it. Experts found no evidence of tampering. Some suggested electromagnetic interference from underground wiring. Others preferred not to work near it at all. During a late-night cleaning shift, a janitor reported seeing a figure wearing the armor reflected in the glass, only to realize the real armor behind it had not moved. He quit the next day. Visitors often describe feeling a weight near the display, like a presence demanding respect. Many bow instinctively, without knowing why. Some claim the armor radiates sadness, not rage, a longing to finish a duty left undone. Shinto priests once performed a purification ritual, but the disturbances only grew louder afterward, as if insulted. The museum now forbids rituals of any kind near it, claiming the spirit does not respond well to interference. Historians point out that Japanese folklore is filled with tsukumogami, objects so old and filled with emotion they awaken to consciousness. A warrior's armor, steeped in death and honor, might be the perfect vessel for such a spirit. Whether you believe that or not, one thing remains certain: no one dares touch it bare-handed anymore. And if you ever visit, do not lean too close. Some say if you look into the mosque's empty eyes long enough, you will see movement inside, a flicker of reflection that is not yours. A warrior still standing, still guarding, still waiting for an order that will never come. In the heart of Verona, city of lovers and tragedy, there is said to be a mirror that weeps, not with tears of glass or rain, but with memory. Locals call it Lo Specchio del Pianto, the mirror of sorrow. It hangs in a decaying villa once owned by the Contarini family, who were known for their beauty, wealth, and spectacular misfortunes. The story begins in the 1800s with Isabella Contarini, a young woman promised to marry a nobleman she did not love. Her true heart belonged to a poet, a poor dreamer who swore he would make her immortal with his words. Her father found out, and on the eve of her arranged wedding, the poet disappeared. Some say drowned in the Adige River, others whisper he was buried beneath the garden. Isabella was found dead 2 days later in front of her dressing mirror, her bridal veil draped across her body. Her eyes were open, her hand pressed against the glass. When the servants tried to clean the mirror, they found her handprint still there, wet, as though left moments before. It never faded. Over time, the mirror became infamous. Those who looked into it claimed to see faces behind their own, crying silently, their tears running down the reflection even when the glass itself remained dry. The family kept it covered for generations, saying it brought nothing but despair. In 1923, when the last Contarini heir sold the villa, he warned the buyer, never uncover the mirror on a rainy night. Of course, someone did. That night, thunder rolled through Verona, and the new owner's wife uncovered the mirror out of curiosity. By morning she was gone, vanished. Only a handprint remained, identical to Isabella's, pressed against the cold glass. Investigators searched for explanations: chemical residue, condensation, optical illusion, but found nothing. The handprints were not on the surface at all. They seemed embedded within the silver, impossible to remove. Since then, the mirror has passed through collectors, each meeting strange fates, sudden illness, broken engagements, inexplicable grief. One curator hung it briefly in an art exhibit about death. Visitors reported feeling watched from the other side. A photographer caught what appeared to be a face crying inside the reflection, a woman with hollow eyes and a veil of mist. The photo, of course, was lost when his studio burned down that same night. Modern skeptics blame humidity, mercury oxidation, or even subliminal suggestion. But there is something about mirrors that has always unsettled humanity. We trust them to tell us who we are, yet we forget they also show us what we refuse to see. Maybe the crying mirror is not haunted by a ghost at all. Maybe it simply reflects the sorrow of anyone who dares look too long, magnifying loneliness, echoing grief. Still, those who have seen it claim one truth: it never reflects tears unless the viewer's heart hides them already. So if you ever wander through Verona's old quarter and stumble upon a mirror for sale in a dusty antique shop, framed in tarnished silver and smelling faintly of salt water, walk away, because sometimes reflection is not about seeing yourself. It is about what sees you back. In the cobblestone heart of Prague, where mist curls around ancient spires and the streets still hum with the ghosts of alchemists, there is a small puppet theater older than any living man. And inside, locked in a glass cabinet, hangs a marionette that no puppeteer dares to touch. Its name is Pavel, though no one knows who gave it that name. Locals call it the Devil's Puppet. It is carved from dark wood, its paint cracked with age, its eyes made of polished onyx that seem to follow anyone who enters the room. Its strings are frayed but never fall, always pulled taut, as though something invisible keeps them raised. The puppet was said to have been crafted in the 18th century by a toymaker named Joseph Rezek, who wanted to create the most lifelike marionette ever seen. He worked on it obsessively, using wood from a gallows tree, the kind used to hang criminals. When he finished, the puppet was a masterpiece of movement and detail, able to mimic emotion so perfectly that people swore it breathed. But then, strange things began to happen. Rezek was found dead in his workshop, hanging from the same strings he used to control the puppet. His apprentices swore they heard laughter that night, high-pitched, mechanical, like wood creaking in rhythm. After that, no one touched Pavel again. The puppet vanished for decades, then resurfaced in a small theater during the 1920s, when a director bought it as a curiosity. During rehearsals, the strings would move on their own. Actors complained of hearing footsteps behind the stage when everyone was present. One night, after locking the theater, the janitor returned to find the puppet standing upright in the center of the stage, its arms raised like a performer, awaiting applause. When he tried to lift it, the strings tangled around his wrists on their own, cutting deep enough to draw blood. He quit the next day. Over the years, every troupe that displayed Pavel experienced misfortune, fires, bankruptcies, disappearances. Eventually, the theater sealed it behind glass, where it still hangs today. Tourists come to see it, to joke about curses, to take photos. Some say their cameras refuse to focus on it, or that the puppet's expression changes slightly between shots. One visitor claimed to see its jaw twitch, as if forming words. Another fainted after insisting she felt something breathing behind her, as she leaned close to the case. Paranormal researchers have tried studying it, but electronic devices malfunction, batteries drain, and audio recordings fill with faint whispering in Czech, repeating a single word, Harajam, we play. Skeptics argue it is all suggestion, the perfect theater for fear. But the people of Prague treat it with quiet respect. They leave small offerings at its feet, coins, ribbons, marionette tools, as though acknowledging it as one of their own. Puppetry, after all, is an art of control, humans making lifeless things dance. Maybe that is why the story feels so poetic. Perhaps Pavel's curse is not vengeance but rebellion, a creation that refused to be controlled. Some say on certain nights when the moonlight hits the stage just right, the puppet's shadow detaches from its body and performs alone, bowing at the end to an audience of none. If you ever visit the theater and hear soft footsteps behind the curtain after closing, do not look. Just applaud quietly and leave, because in Prague, even the puppets know how to take a final bow. Technology was not supposed to believe in ghosts, but sometimes it does anyway. In the 1980s, a series of events began that still haunts telephone engineers to this day. Calls that came from numbers that no longer existed, voices recognized as those of the dead. The most famous case came from Illinois, where a woman named Ruth received a call from her mother 2 days after the funeral. The line was filled with static, the kind that sounds like rain against metal. Then, faintly, she heard it, a voice saying her name the way only her mother did. Ruthie. The The call lasted less than a minute before cutting out. When Ruth dialed back, she reached the disconnected tone. The number had been deactivated. Phone company records showed no incoming call at that time. It was not an isolated case. All over the United States, people began reporting phantom calls. Widows, parents, soldiers' families, voices from those who should not have been able to speak. Some were short goodbyes, others warnings. One man swore his deceased business partner called to remind him of an unpaid debt. He checked the next morning. The bank had drafted the wrong account exactly as the voice said. In 2003, the phenomenon escalated when investigators compiled dozens of audio recordings from private voicemails and answering machines. The tapes captured whispers, laughter, even full sentences spoken by people long dead. The most unsettling thing was not the content, it was the distortion, the tonal quality that experts could not replicate. It was not human interference, nor radio signals, nor crosslines. One analyst described it as sound traveling through water, but underwater that breathes. Some theorized electromagnetic remnants of consciousness could attach to technology. That emotion, grief, longing, left an imprint strong enough to hijack the static. Paranormal researchers called it instrumental transcommunication, or ITC. Skeptics blamed crosswire interference and confirmation bias. But how do you explain when calls come from numbers buried in old directories, or from rotary phones disconnected decades ago? In one case, a man received a voicemail from his brother, who had died in a plane crash 10 years earlier. The timestamp matched the anniversary of the crash, to the minute. The message was clear, calm, and heartbreaking. "I am okay now. Do not come looking." The man deleted it in panic. Hours later, the voicemail returned. Same message. No record in the carrier logs. Psychologists say grief can make people hear what they need to hear. But grief can't make a modern phone ring from a cut line, can it? The FBI once quietly investigated reports of posthumous calls tied to unsolved deaths, suspecting hackers or hoaxers, but nothing was found. One technician who reviewed the tapes quit, saying whatever's on those lines is not human and it knows our names. Today, the stories have evolved into the digital age. People report texts from dead relatives, social media messages sent years after burial. Some explain it as data lag, old drafts, or algorithms. Others think it is something older, learning new tricks. Perhaps death, like the internet, never really deletes anything, just moves it to another folder. So if your phone ever rings late at night, showing a number you know should not exist, maybe let it go to voicemail. Because even if the voice says it is someone you miss, answering might mean you are the one being called. There is something oddly intimate about an old typewriter. The rhythmic clack of keys, the smell of ink and metal, the way thoughts become sound before they become words. But for one struggling writer in 1960s New York, those sounds did not always wait for him to start typing. His name was Leonard Grayson, a novelist whose career had collapsed under alcoholism and failure. One night, wandering through a pawn shop, he found an antique Remington typewriter, its keys slightly rusted, a ribbon already threaded. The shopkeeper said it came from the estate of a writer who had died mid-manuscript. "It has still got stories left in it," the man joked. Leonard took it home. That night he fell asleep drunk at his desk and woke to the unmistakable sound of typing. The machine was moving on its own, the keys hammering steadily. The paper rolled out a single sentence, "Finish what he started." At first, Leonard thought it was a prank, maybe a draft from his shaking hands, but then he noticed his own name typed across the next line in a style he did not use. Over the next few days, the machine began producing fragments, paragraphs, dialogue, even entire pages written in another voice. Sometimes it wrote in languages Leonard did not speak. The stories were vivid, violent, and brilliant. Editors who saw the new work called it his best writing yet. Leonard accepted the praise, but could not escape the feeling that he was not the one writing anymore. The typewriter grew more demanding. It would start typing in the middle of the night, waking him with that dry, percussive rhythm, the carriage sliding like a breath between worlds. One morning, he found his own unfinished manuscript rewritten, every line altered, every character dead. The final words, "We are not done." When he tried to destroy the typewriter, it bit back, literally. As he reached for it, One of the metal arms snapped upward and cut his finger to the bone. Blood dripped on the keys. That night the machine typed by itself again, spelling his name over and over until dawn. Friends who visited claimed to hear faint whispers under the clatter, like someone dictating from another room. One guest, a journalist, stayed overnight to prove Leonard wrong. He left before sunrise, pale and shaking, refusing to speak of what he saw. After Leonard's death in 1974, found slumped over the typewriter, a blank sheet in the carriage, the police noted that his fingerprints were missing from the machine, as if wiped clean. Yet, his final manuscript sat beside it, a novel about a man haunted by his own words. It was posthumously published, and critics called it a masterpiece. No one noticed that the dedication page simply read, "To the other author." The Remington vanished after his estate was sold, but rumors persist. Some say it ended up with a screenwriter in Los Angeles who died mysteriously mid-script. Others claim it is somewhere in a private collection, locked away because it won't stop typing, and occasionally, rare book dealers receive unsigned pages, freshly typed, yellowed with age, stories no one remembers writing. Maybe the typewriter was never haunted by a ghost. Maybe it is haunted by creation itself, the hunger to keep telling stories, no matter who has to bleed for them. So if you ever find an old typewriter at a flea market, its keys still warm to the touch, do yourself a favor. Do not press anything. Some stories do not need your permission to begin. It sits in the corner of an antique shop in Vienna, small and unassuming. A brass music box engraved with roses and cherubs, the kind you would expect to play lullabies for a child long gone. The owner keeps it behind glass, claiming it is for display only. He does not say why, but locals know. They call it La Lamentazione, the lament. It is said that when the box plays, someone dies before dawn. The story dates back to the 19th century, when it was crafted by a clockmaker named Elias Kron. He built it for his wife, Clara, a pianist who died giving birth to their child. Heartbroken, Elias locked himself away for months, determined to build something that could capture her music forever. When he emerged, he carried the box, a masterpiece of gears and grief. He wound it once, and the melody that played was hauntingly beautiful, delicate but full of sorrow. They say it sounded like Clara's final lullaby. That night, Elias was found dead, his face peaceful, the box still spinning. Over the years, the music box changed hands, passed from collector to collector, each drawn to its mournful tune, each meeting a sudden end. A nobleman in Prague who played it during a masquerade was found lifeless before sunrise. A Parisian socialite wound it for her guests. By morning, her house had burned down. The melody always stopped at the same note, a single unfinished chord, hanging in the air like a question the world refused to answer. In the 1930s, it resurfaced in Germany, studied by physicists who believed it produced infrasonic frequencies, sounds too low for human hearing but powerful enough to induce dread, nausea, and hallucination. One experiment recorded faint human voices within the tones, whispering in different languages. When the lead researcher listened through headphones, he tore them off screaming, shouting, "It knows my name." He never spoke again. During World War E, the box vanished in the chaos, rumored destroyed in a bombing. Decades later, it appeared in an Austrian estate sale, perfectly intact, still gleaming, still wound tight. The shopkeeper who bought it claimed to hear faint sobbing from inside when the store was empty. Once, a curious customer wound it despite his protests. The melody played for exactly 30 seconds before stopping abruptly. That night, lightning struck the shop's roof. The man who wound it never came back. Scientists today dismiss the legend, saying the melody's effect is psychological, a mix of frequencies triggering emotional resonance. But those who've heard it describe something deeper, a sense of unbearable loss, as though the box is not merely playing music, but remembering it. The box is still there today, its key permanently removed, though some swear it still hums softly when the shop is quiet, like it is trying to finish the song. And if you listen too closely, you might hear what others claim to have heard in its final notes, not music, but a voice whispering, "Come back." So if you ever find a music box that sounds too sad to be handmade, do not open it, because some songs are not meant to be played again. Art historians love to say that paintings are immortal, that beauty outlives the body. But Lady Eleanor's portrait never learned that lesson. It keeps disappearing. The story begins in 1763 in the English countryside, when Lord Whitmore commissioned a young artist named Jonathan Hale to paint his wife, Eleanor, a woman renowned for her beauty and her silence. Hale worked tirelessly, obsessing over the light in her eyes, the stillness in her posture. When the portrait was unveiled, it was breathtaking, so lifelike that guests swore her chest moved, that her lips trembled when her husband spoke. But within a month, Eleanor fell ill and died suddenly. Heart failure, they said. Lord Whitmore sealed the room where the portrait hung and vanished into mourning. Servants later reported hearing footsteps pacing behind the locked door, and a woman's sigh echoing through the halls. When the door was finally opened years later, the painting was gone. The frame remained, but the canvas inside it was empty, blank as snow. They searched everywhere, assuming theft, but there was no sign of forced entry. Days later, the portrait reappeared, hanging once again in its place, untouched. Lord Whitmore, now half mad with grief, demanded it be burned. The servants lit the fire, but the canvas refused to burn, only the frame charred. The next morning, the portrait was gone again. Since then, it has surfaced and vanished dozens of times across centuries. In the 1920s, a London art dealer bought it from a private collector. He hung it proudly in his gallery, only for it to disappear overnight. 2 weeks later, it was found inside a locked crate in another city, wrapped in fabric that smelled faintly of roses and smoke. In the 1950s, a museum displayed it briefly, but photographs of the portrait always developed empty, as though the camera refused to acknowledge her. Some who have seen it describe the same haunting details. Lady Eleanor in a dark gown, her gaze turned slightly over her shoulder, as if listening for someone behind her. Her expression is calm, too calm, and yet her eyes seem wet, as though she has been crying. One curator claimed the background of the portrait changes each time it reappears, sometimes a garden, sometimes a candlelit room, once even a foggy graveyard. When asked how that could be possible, he said quietly, "Maybe she is still moving." Experts have studied the pigment, the canvas fibers, even the frame's age, all perfectly ordinary. Yet security footage from 1986 shows the painting simply fading out of existence, frame and all, in the span of a few seconds, replaced by a shimmer of light. Some believe it is an elaborate forgery trick. Others say the original artist captured something he should not have, a soul caught between devotion and despair. Locals tell another story, that Eleanor's spirit refuses to stay still because her husband's guilt keeps her restless. He had poisoned her, they whisper, for loving another man. Perhaps that is why her image cannot stay confined. It returns to places where betrayal still lingers, where eyes still lie. Today, no one knows where the portrait is. It vanished again in 2012 from a private vault in Oxfordshire, and the security cameras that night recorded nothing but a faint hum, like distant singing. If you ever see an unsigned portrait of a woman with pale blue eyes, turn slightly to the left, and a strange feeling creeps up your spine. Do not look too long. She might decide to follow you home. Deep in the archives of the Smithsonian, far from the crowds and flashing cameras, there sits a collection so unsettling that even seasoned criminologists hesitate to enter alone. They call it the Nutshell Studies of Unexplained Death, a series of painstakingly detailed dollhouses created in the 1940s by a wealthy woman named Frances Glessner Lee. Each miniature room, complete with tiny furniture, blood splatter, and human figures frozen in the moment of death, was designed to train homicide detectives to read crime scenes. But one of them, they say, is different. One that was never catalogued, never photographed, and officially does not exist. It is known among staff as the Dollhouse of Despair. It is smaller than the others, built to perfect scale, but unlike the training models, this one shows no staged crime, only a quiet bedroom. A woman sitting upright on the bed, smiling faintly, her throat cut open. Every detail is immaculate. The peeling wallpaper, the half-empty glass on the nightstand, the curtains drawn tight as though someone wanted privacy. But what makes it infamous is not what is inside, it is what happens around it. Security guards claim that every time the lights dim for the night, they hear faint music boxes playing from the exhibit room. Others report the air turning colder, a metallic taste like pennies on the tongue. Some have seen movement, a flicker of shadow inside the dollhouse, even when the glass is sealed. One night, a janitor cleaning the floor swore he heard a woman whisper, "Look closer." When he did, he fainted. He later said the doll's eyes were not plastic anymore. They were real. No one knows who built it. Francis Glessner Lee's surviving notes never mention it, and museum logs list no record of its arrival. Some claim it was donated anonymously. Others believe it simply appeared one morning after an exhibit reshuffling. One historian tracing its materials discovered that the wood used in the frame matches the type used in coffins from the 1930s. The fabric on the doll's dress contained traces of dried hemoglobin, human blood. Still, skeptics dismiss it as myth, but myths do not trigger motion sensors. Myths do not leave condensation inside glass cases. And yet there are reports, archived but never published, of the doll's posture changing between inspections, the woman's smile widening just slightly over the years. Forensic experts who've studied the official nutshell studies say Frances's attention to realism bordered on obsession. She sometimes used strands of her own hair for authenticity. What if she, or someone after her, took that obsession too far? Perhaps the dollhouse of despair was not built to teach detectives how to solve death but to preserve it, to trap a moment of agony so perfectly it became alive again. Some researchers think it might represent a real, unsolved murder. One erased from police records, recreated to remember what others wanted forgotten. If that is true, then whoever that woman was, her last scream still echoes inside the glass. Staff members occasionally report nightmares after handling the display. One described dreaming of walking inside the tiny room, only to see a giant face outside the window, his own. The next day, he quit. The museum keeps the dollhouse in a locked storage vault now. No labels, no tours. But sometimes, when interns inventory the shelves, they say they hear tapping from one of the boxes. 3 knocks. Always 3. So if you ever find yourself in a museum basement and hear something small knocking in the dark, do not answer. Some exhibits, it seems, still remember being alive. It was supposed to be impossible, a watch still ticking 3 days after its owner was buried. But impossibility never stopped stories like this from becoming legend. The timepiece in question is an elegant pocket watch, 19th century, gold-plated with an engraving on the back that reads simply to F.W. until the end. It belonged to Frederick Wentham, a British sea captain who vanished during a storm in 1891. When his body was recovered, they found the watch clutched tightly in his hand, still ticking, its glass unbroken despite being submerged for nearly a week. The family buried it with him, thinking it fitting that it should rest where time had stopped. Except time did not. Days later, the gravedigger swore he heard a faint ticking sound while tending the nearby plots. At first he thought it was in his head, until he leaned close and realized the noise was coming from the ground, from Wentham's coffin. The priest ordered the grave opened. Inside, the body was untouched, and the watch still ran, its hands perfectly synchronized with the church clock above. They removed it, cleaned it, and locked it in the rectory safe. By the next morning, the safe door was open, the watch gone. It reappeared decades later in London, sold anonymously to a collector who claimed it never wound down. He died of a heart attack 3 weeks later. The coroner's report noted the watch was still running when his body was found. Since then, the watch has passed through a dozen owners, each meeting an untimely death, stroke, accident, drowning, all within a month of acquiring it. Each time, the watch continued to tick, as if indifferent to its keepers. Some say it is a mechanical marvel, a perfect perpetual motion design ahead of its time. But engineers who examined it found no explanation, no hidden gears, no external power source, no plausible reason for motion that should have ceased a century ago. The mechanism defies physics, its mainspring shows no wear, its balance wheel moves with eerie precision, and yet no one dares disassemble it twice. The last horologist who tried reportedly went blind the next day. There is a theory whispered among those who study cursed relics, that time itself leaves traces, and objects that witness death can become stuck between moments, recycling energy from what was lost. If that is true, then perhaps Wentham's last heartbeat became the engine that drives the watch, a loop of finality turning forever. The strangest thing, though, is that the hands do not tell normal time anymore. They drift slightly ahead of every clock in the room, as if running toward something. In 1979, a researcher noticed a pattern. The second hand accelerated briefly whenever someone nearby spoke of death, as if listening, as if eager. Today, The watch is rumored to be in a private collection in Geneva, kept sealed in a lead-lined case. The owner refuses to look at it, but his servants claim that on quiet nights they still hear ticking through the metal, steady as a heartbeat. It is comforting at first, until you realize the rhythm does not match your pulse. And if you listen too long, it starts to sound less like time and more like breathing. So if you ever come across an antique watch that still ticks when it should not, resist the urge to hold it to your ear. Because some clocks do not count hours anymore, they count souls. There is an old church on the outskirts of Cornwall, abandoned and half swallowed by the sea, where fishermen swear they still hear a bell toll at night even though its tower collapsed a century ago. The locals call it the Bell of St. Mercy, though mercy is the one thing it never brought. The bell was forged in 1623, commissioned after a plague swept through the village. It was meant to honor the dead, to call the living back to prayer. But the blacksmith who cast it used metal salvaged from ships that had gone down in the channel, vessels that had taken hundreds of lives with them. He melted tragedy into sound, and something inside the metal never stopped screaming. When the bell was first rung, witnesses said its tone was unlike anything human. Low, trembling, and strangely mournful, as if thousands of voices were crying inside it. Soon after, the deaths began again. Every time the bell tolled for the dead, another villager followed within days. They said it was because the bell did not just announce death, it invited it. The priest ordered it silenced, but storms tore the ropes loose on their own, the bell ringing wildly during thunder as though rejoicing. By 1702, the village was nearly empty. Lightning finally struck the tower, melting part of the bell and toppling it into the sea. For centuries, no one dared rebuild the church. Yet sometimes, when the fog rolls in from the coast, people hear a single toll echo across the cliffs, deep and distant, followed by whispers that sound like names being read aloud. In 1938, divers exploring the wreckage found the bell half buried in silt crusted with coral but whole. They hauled it to the surface, and 3 of them drowned within a week. The 4th diver claimed to hear the bell tolling in his dreams. He shot himself a month later. The artifact was taken to a maritime museum, where it was polished and displayed. The curator reported that every night at exactly 3:17 m, the air around it vibrated, and faint murmurs filled the hall. Instruments picked up infrasound frequencies below human hearing, the kind known to induce fear and hallucinations. Still, the whispers persisted. Some visitors said they could make out words in Old Cornish, a dead language. The phrase translated loosely to "We are still beneath." In 1965, the museum burned down. Everything inside was destroyed except the bell, found blackened but intact in the rubble, still faintly warm. Since then, its whereabouts have been carefully hidden. Some say it was reburied in consecrated ground. Others insist it is locked deep inside a naval archive in London. But sailors passing that stretch of sea at night still report hearing a single bell toll through the mist, clear and mournful, though no church stands for miles. They say if you hear it once, you will dream of water for 7 nights. If you hear it twice, you will never return to shore. Bells, after all, were meant to guide the living, but sometimes they call the wrong way. Perhaps that is what the whisper of the forgotten bell really is, a reminder that even when we bury the dead, they still find ways to answer. And maybe that is why you can still hear it tonight, faint and far away, somewhere between the waves, ringing for someone who has just begun to listen. And now, as the echoes fade, thank you for staying through every shadow, every whisper, every cursed heartbeat of this journey. If you have made it this far, tell me in the comments which story haunted you most, or better yet, what object would you never want to meet alone in the dark until next time? Keep your lights low, your heart steady, and remember, some stories do not end when you stop listening. They just wait.